Let's bring in Professor John Crown, independent senator and, of course, an oncologist, consultant oncologist as well. John Crown, good afternoon to you.
Hello, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm very well. Can I just ask you what is in this Public Health Tobacco Amendment Bill that you are amongst a number of politicians in introducing to the Seanad today?
Well, Jonathan, I'm the principal sponsor of this bill, which is a very simple piece of legislation which would amend the existing smoking ban to make it illegal to smoke in a car where there are children present. That's all it would do. It's very simple. It's minimalist. The data are really overwhelming at this stage that passive smoke, secondhand smoke, side stream smoke is dangerous for everyone. It's particularly dangerous for children. And the data are really quite stark for the degree of exposure which occurs within a car. It is extraordinarily risky compared to other environments. It's 60 times higher concentration of dangerous particles in a smoke-free home. The concentration of environmental pollutants is 30 times higher in a car after one cigarette than it is at the level that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency would make you flee the streets and close the windows.
John, you make it sound as it's even more dangerous for the fella who's smoking the cigarette to stay in that car, never mind the child in the back seat.
Well, absolutely it is. Listen, I think at this stage all rational people understand that smoking is the leading cause of preventable ill health in our society, and we should be doing everything we can to minimise smoking.
John Mallon of Forest Eireann, you're the representative body for smokers in this country. John, that's a reasonable argument, isn't it?
Hello, Jonathan. Well, it is a reasonable argument, except that it precludes the idea that the parents of children who smoke would automatically be bad parents and smoke in front of them. We would be against people obviously smoking in a car with children present. It isn't necessary. They don't have to. And I just think that the law is not necessary. Waste of time and resources. It begs the question, how do you police it? What will it all cost? And I think in this country at the moment there are much more pressing issues to be looked at than something like this. I just think it's a waste of time.
John Crown?
Well, I've looked at many issues, and I've spent the 19 years since I've come back to Ireland as an advocate for reform of the health service, developed the cancer services in recent years for political reform, for all manner of things. This is not the only issue I'm involved in. However, it's one issue I can make some difference in because I'm not a member of a political party. I'm an independent, and it's so obvious that this needs to be done, and it was not on the programme of legislation. I know the Minister is very well disposed towards the idea of banning smoking in cars with children, and we said, well, let's just do it. We can do this very quickly. A very simple piece of legislation makes it illegal. I believe it is enforceable, but I believe that the principal benefit from this is not the enforcement, it's the educational value. I think, no matter what Mr. Mallon says, people still are doing this. Now, thankfully, there aren't as many as there were, but it is the common experience for people who are stopped in traffic lights that you still see people lighting up in cars with children present. So it does happen, and I think the salutary effect of the warning that what you are doing has been shown by experts to be so dangerous that they've gone to the trouble of making it illegal, I think in itself will have an educational and a deterrent value.
John, I can't find fault with that argument. I really can't. And I know you're saying that there's no need to do this because parents are responsible, and nobody's saying they're hideously bad parents. But the educational argument alone, the reason the smoking ban was successful wasn't because they banned smoking. It's because everybody, once it stopped, said, do you know what, that actually wasn't a bad thing for society.
Yes, but ask yourself, Jonathan, who are the people who complied with the smoking ban? It was the smokers themselves, and I haven't heard them congratulated.
Well, there was no point in the non-smokers. There was no celebration going to come from them.
Exactly. Well, so there you go. Now, one of the things that bothers me about this, when this was first mooted, I remember reading the Irish Times on the Saturday morning afterwards, and the senior civil servant was quoted in the Irish Times as saying, look, they'd have a look at this if it was going to go to law, and if they felt it was impossible to police, this idea of trying to distinguish between cars with people smoking in them and how. But
it'll be the point that John Crown is making is going to be self-policing. Once the law is in place, people think more about it, and therefore it happens. That's what happened with the smoking ban in general. That's what's happened. That's what will happen with this.
But the point is, Jonathan, it's self-policing already, or should be. Now, in the event, what the senior civil service said was that if they found that it was impossible to police that way, they might consider banning smoking in cars altogether for everybody. And you see, unfortunately, all of these restrictions that are constantly being introduced they're, to my mind, a way of punishing smokers for their choice, their free choice to smoke a legal product. But in the event they get worse and worse and more draconian each time. And my worry would be that this thing would get completely out of hand. The smokers are complying with all the rules as they go along at the moment.
Define out of hand. How would you categorise out of hand now? We're talking about smoking in cars with kids, but do you think it'll go further?
Well, like I said, a senior civil servant was quoted in the Irish Times as saying if they felt this couldn't be policed, they might just consider a ban outright in cars. And in fact, only recently I heard Professor Crown saying that when they were looking at this legislation, they also looked at the possibility of sticking on it a ban on smoking in the home. And you see, this eventually what he is saying, you can't smoke here, you can't smoke there, you can't smoke anywhere, while in the same breath saying you have a right to if you wish.
John Crown, where would you stop on this?
Mr. Mallon, a few things need to be said here. Mr. Mallon's organisation is partly sponsored by the tobacco industry, number one, and I'm not saying they don't have a right to sponsor him, but they do. Number two, Mr. Mallon, I think, is exhibiting classic addiction thinking, and I speak with some authority on it. I'm a reformed tobacco addict myself, and I can think of all the rationalizations I used to offer when people were, putting strictures on where you could and couldn't smoke, and you kept thinking, how unreasonable are these people? What kind of Puritans are they? If the smoke offends them so much, why don't they go outside?
How much did you smoke, John Crown? I never realised that you were a smoker previously.
I gave up cigarettes 25 odd years ago, and I was a good going regular, smoker. Different levels at different times in my life, but I was a full-blown addict who had
20 a day, man?
Oh, easy.
Okay,
easy.
So this is framing your thinking. Go back to this idea that of the addiction and how it drives possibly the debate on this.
Oh, it totally drives the debate. There are very few non-smokers who come out defending the smoking position in this. It is generally always smokers. And the reality is that, that craving blunts your rational thoughts. And Mr. Forrest, with great respect, is stating, what for him would be the doomsday scenario of having smoking banned in cars. Well, he has to just look into his soul and think, what would be the worst outcome? Banning smoking in cars completely or allowing people to smoke in cars with children. Now, I'm proposing the intermediate step, which is that you cannot smoke in a car with children present. And I have heard nothing from the civil service or from anyone else to suggest that because of an unenforceability that they're extending it to all smokers. And please remember something. This is the irrational, illogical situation we have right now in Ireland. At the moment, it is illegal for you to smoke on your own in your company car. You will lose your job and you're breaking the law, but it is entirely legal to smoke in a car with 3 small children strapped in the back seat.
John Mallon, what do you make of that argument that craving blunts rational thoughts, that smokers are looking at this from the wrong perspective?
Well, look, I can argue the toss on that. I've looked at a recent study done at the University of Tel Aviv that says that the reason cessation products aren't working is because they're assuming that smoking is an addiction, where in fact it's a very strong habit. Now, I'm not suggesting...
Are you saying it's not addiction? It's not an addiction?
Hang on, Jonathan. I'm not saying that that's right. I'm saying that all medical science doesn't point in one direction. There are dissenters. There are those that say that if you view it a different way. But in the end of the day, smoking is still legal in this country, as is drinking, as are a whole variety of other things which aren't particularly good for you. They're legal. We're not robots. We are human beings. We have our weaknesses and so on. I don't understand why, in the case of, say, the outdoor ban, it's the sight of the smoker that's bothering some people. Now, that's verging on phobia. If you're going to live and let live...
But to be fair, John Crown's not advocating that at the moment. He's keeping this on a straight, simple ban smoking in cars with children. Nobody's saying that we need to have some police force going round condemning someone who's having a fag on the side of the street. But
that's exactly what's happening. That's where it's all headed. And you see, it's bit by bit, it's piecemeal.
Are you getting ahead of yourself there, John Mallon, ever so slightly?
No, not at all. I'm watching what's happened. I recall when the ban came in first, we were told, go outdoors. It's perfectly safe to smoke out there. Now it's not safe to smoke on a beach.
Why is it not safe?
Because the minister is going to introduce legislation to ban smoking on beaches. No, he's not saying that there's any. I actually was on television with him recently, and he was asked the question about danger, and he said, no, danger, it's not danger. It's got to do with setting a bad example. And after a while, this kind of thing is creeping. I'm not accusing John necessarily in this specific instance, but after a while, the thing starts to get a bit out of hand. We don't like the sight of people enjoying themselves having a cigarette. And, it's starting to get very, very strange. We're going to
I got to get in here. I'm sorry. We know what I don't like the sight of more than anything? The look on a 40-year-old's face when I tell her she's dying of lung cancer. That's what I don't like the sight of, Mr. Mallon. I'm sorry. This is really twisted thinking on your part. Will you at least admit and acknowledge that cigarette smoking causes lung cancer? Will you acknowledge that?
Of course. Naturally I do.
So do you not think that as a high goal in society we should help people get off this foul, addictive, toxic, cancer-causing habit? Do you really think that some abstract notion that the rights of addicts are higher than their health? Do you really believe that? You really have clouded judgment.
Well, John, what are you saying there? Are you saying that we now have a right to force behaviour on people in terms of legal products? Is that what you're saying? That force is the way forward?
This with exactly no fear of contradiction. And if anybody sits down and looks at it, what would the likelihood be that if we discovered tobacco tomorrow for the first time, it would be a legal product? Everybody, every rational, sentient person knows it would be banned instantly. Now, the reality is it has been grandfathered into a level of cultural acceptance and a very immoral industry which has acted completely in the interest of increasing the pool of addicts because their pool of existing customers has a habit of dying of lung cancer and bronchitis and premature heart disease. The only way that this market can be kept going is by encouraging new children and new teenagers to take it up. That's the only way they can work. So I think having a very high societal goal of ending this illegal trade is a reasonable thing to do. It's not what we're doing in this bill. This bill is about protecting children, protecting real children that live now from a very real threat that anybody who is stopped in a traffic jam sees, maybe not on a daily basis, but sees on a weekly basis, which is their exposure to cancer and other dangerous chemicals.
John Mallon, do you at least acknowledge that tobacco is addictive, that you can get addicted to this?
Look, Jonathan, what I'm saying is the doctor's aspirations, I have absolutely no difficulty with. The methodology, though, bit by bit, is to force smokers' hands, to say to them, you must give up. We demand that you give up. We're going to make your life so uncomfortable. We're going to price them out of existence. We're going to introduce laws and bans everywhere that you can't smoke anywhere. We're going to make it illegal to smoke in your own home, while at the same time maintaining that we've got no difficulty, you've got freedom of choice, you may do with your life as you please. That's my problem with all of this.
John, where does this end? Because there are obviously concerns among smokers. Now, I'm not a smoker myself, but there are concerns among smokers that this will eventually go too far, that there will be some stupid law brought in that will ban smoking in the home, or it will ban smoking in beaches or in public parks. It will be virtually unenforceable, and that is just going to really force them in the opposite direction. They're going to become more divided.
My position is very clear. I think the priority right now is to make, enact and enforce laws which protect non-smokers from the consequences of being exposed to smoke. I think that is the highest of high priorities, and I think the visionary law that Micheál Martin brought in a decade ago really set the standard around the world for that, and we're just trying to extend that a little bit. I have a longer-term goal, however. My longer-term goal is that while I believe people have the right to smoke, I believe that we should set a date across Europe sometime about 2025, 2030, and say, after that date, we are going to acknowledge what we know now, that it is immoral and wrong to try and make new addicts, that the manufacture, sale and import of tobacco products will be banned at that stage. This is a long-term aspirational goal.
You made the point earlier on that if tobacco was introduced today, it would be banned.
Absolutely.
But at the same time,
could
you not make the same argument for alcohol, that if alcohol was introduced and the state would have a good look at it, and then it would worry about all of the effects that alcohol have? You look at the problems with the liver, you look at problems with alcoholism.
I would strongly suggest that you look at my submissions to the Health Committee of the Oireachtas about this, because I think there is a huge problem with alcohol in this country, and I think that we're doing it the wrong way. I think the goal of our society should be not getting into partnership with the manufacturers. The goal in our society should be to ensure that we have a drastic decline in the consumption of alcohol in this country.
Finally, John Mallon, just to finish up on this, if this bill is passed by the Oireachtas, do you think it'll have the support of smokers?
You see, smokers have got to a point now where, and this is the unfortunate thing, prior to the ban, smoking rates were falling year on year. They had gone down, according to the Office of Tobacco Control, to 23.5%. They're now up to 29%. I think the ban there's been unintended consequences of it. And I think the more it's restricted, the more it glamorises smoking, which I don't welcome at all. I'm fighting.
Doesn't the tobacco industry glamorise smoking more than the likes of John Crown?
Well, the tobacco industry haven't been in a position to glamorise anything. I'm not talking on their behalf, but I don't see ads on the television. I watch the Grand Prix. I don't see their ads on cars anymore.
John, you are an ad on their behalf, for God's sake. Your organisation is funded by these people, and you're here advocating liberalisation of smoking laws. So I think you actually are an ad for it. I'm sorry, you're not a particularly good ad for it, but you are an ad for it.
John Mallon?
Well, I'm constantly getting this. This is a tactic of the anti-smoking brigade. Shoot the messenger every time. I am a volunteer. My costs or expenses, if I incur them, are paid for by forests in the UK. They then get money from tobacco companies. We are an independent organisation fighting for the rights of smokers. We do not promote smoking. I'm not promoting a particular brand of it, and I'm not suggesting that anyone takes it up.
All right, we leave it there. John Mallon, Forest Ireland, a representative body for smokers, and Professor John Crown, independent senator and of course an oncologist with St Vincent and a former smoker, something I didn't realise before now. Thank you both very much for talking to us. Lots and lots of listener comments. We'll get through some of them next here on Newstalk Lunchtime.